Hello. That's so cool I get to do this. The last bit. Thank you. Thank you for that honour and privilege. And it does feel kind of nice that I got to do the very first one, and this time I get to do the very last one. So I get to experience both of those things. I was actually speaking at, I was invited to speak at a, whoops. That's fine. Is that okay? At a non-duality conference a few weeks ago. It was rubbish, there was no one there. So when Sheila asked me to do this, she said, what do you want to talk about? And just that very week, I'd had this image float into my mind, which they do from time to time. And it was like, I called it a multifaceted jewel. I couldn't tell you what kind of jewel it was, but it just appeared to me as a kind of, I suppose, symbolic representation of the principles understanding. And it was on the back of me having been working with and teaching numerous groups in different places, and also checking in with people who'd been to other groups that I was seeing again, and hearing what they'd heard, which often was absolutely nothing like what I'd shared. And yet they were blown away by it. And in some cases, their life had changed. And I was like, wow, that's so amazing that we can go in to wherever we're going, thinking that we've got something to share because it's been so valuable, what we've seen. And that's true. And yet we don't know, we're not in charge of the ears of the listener. And actually they're not either. So we don't know, and they don't know what they're going to take away from it. And I just began to be really struck by this fact that there's all these facets. And most of us, we have like an entry point into the principles. Whether maybe for some people they're struggling with something, they're up against it in some way, and someone maybe recommends them to a Three Principles coach or practitioner, that might be their entry point, and they find a kind of help that is unlike anything they've experienced before. And then that's it. It's like they're done. They're not going back to weekly therapy for the rest of their life, right? They're just not doing that. Suddenly their consciousness has shifted to another place. They felt the benefit and they're on their journey with the principles. And for other people, it's maybe they pick up a book, they stumble onto something on YouTube, they get dragged along to something like this. You know who you are. Shame. And they thank the person later who dragged them along. I love this. I've had people sometimes dragged along who had way bigger insights than the person doing the dragging. Which is like divine revenge or something, isn't it? I don't know what that is. But it's so cool that it works that way. We've got two people in the room. I'm going to embarrass you two now because you've done it to me so often. So I was doing a Zoom thing for a bunch of homeopaths a few years ago, and Elena there was watching this because she's a homeopath, among other things. And her partner Nick was like, "What's that? Who's that guy? What's he on about? That's not homeopathy." Something like that, right? And he's listening, and and then he hears something, and he's like, "Whoa, it's not homeopathy, but that's really interesting. What else does he do?" And before I know it, I'm having conversations with, never mind Elena, I'm having conversations with Nick, and then he's signing up for a practitioner program. I'm like, what the hell? Who's in charge? It's not who we think is in charge, is it? But I love that. And whenever I start a training program, I ask people like, "What's your name? How did you get here?" And everybody comes out with these wildly, seemingly random stories of how they planned to do something completely different. And here they are. And they're still baffled by it. And I suppose I'm still a bit baffled by it, but I'm no longer surprised, because that just seems to be how it works. So I started to once I'd seen this image, I started thinking, well, what are those facets? And which ones have I seen? And which ones are kind of hidden around the back that I haven't managed to get a little glimpse of yet? And probably you've seen ones that I haven't, and perhaps vice versa sometimes. But just knowing that they exist, to me, is a really fun thing just to kind of entertain. Because we can sometimes, when we see something, especially if it's something that's really big for you, you know, it's like it brings about a big shift in your understanding of yourself and of life. It's tempting to think, that's it, I've seen it. And I've got this, I know what this principle is about. And then sometime further down the line, another little facet sneaks into your awareness and you go, oh, wait a minute, I thought I had it there. What's this all about? And it opens up like another door, which you didn't even know was there. And you know what? There's loads of them. There's lots and lots of different ones. So I just want to flag a few of them up for you and reflect them back to you, because they'll be familiar to you already. But for some of you, there'll be one that was your entry point and that you've really explored in depth. But there might be others that you're like, yeah, that might be something that I've only had a sneak preview of what's to come. And that's probably true. And the same for myself. So the commonest entry point for people is something to do with thought. I think probably that's fair to say. I think that's often what people share. You know, when we're sharing the principles, people most often share something about thought and feeling, how thought and feeling work together to create our entire experience from the inside out. That's a bit of a game changer, isn't it? If you hadn't realized that before. Just that alone changes lives on a daily basis. You know, if that was the only thing that we shared, we would still be changing lives on a daily basis. Because when someone, that's never occurred to you before, when someone at the right moment, when you've got the ears to hear it, when someone enables you to actually see that for yourself, that that's true. Oh, I'm living in a thought-created experience. I'm not actually experiencing my circumstances, my partner, my kids, my job, my past, my future. None of that. I'm not experiencing any of that directly. What I'm experiencing is my own thought-created experience about that. That's a very different proposition. Why is that powerful? There's a number of reasons. One is that we don't get to point the finger at our partner anymore, or our circumstances, or our past, or our parents, or whatever we thought was the reason we were feeling usually unhappy in some sense. It requires us to turn the mirror around and say, oh, wait a minute, that actually can't be true. It's not maybe that's not true. When we really see it, what hits us is that can't be true. The reason that I've been using to justify the way that I feel actually cannot be true, because it doesn't work that way. And when you see it to that depth, it changes your relationship with other people in a very positive way, because we're not pointing the finger anymore. And it creates a sense of empowerment for yourself. You start to see, well, if I'm really just feeling my thinking and having a thought-created experience, which seems to be happening moment to moment, and it's not fixed, it's actually very fluid, that means I could have a different experience of anything in my life in an instant. And it doesn't matter how long I've been experiencing it one particular way. As soon as my consciousness shifts and I've got fresh thinking available to me, I'm going to have a different experience straight away, without working on my issues. I don't have to make all of that story conscious and try and turn it into a better version of whatever it was. We don't have to do any of that. It's instantaneous. That's miraculous, you know. It still blows me away that that's not only possible, but that's what happens. It's easy to get used to the miracle of that and not to appreciate it for what it is. It's completely wild. We can have a different experience of anything in our life, at any moment in our life, no matter how long we've been experiencing it a particular way. So that's a goodie, isn't it? I mean, that's fantastic. But I was at a conference some years ago, Three Principles Conference in London. Jack Pransky was speaking, and he talked about this when he was here at Viva one time. And I heard him say that he and I think it was Thomas Kelly, they'd done some research And they'd asked a lot of people who'd benefited from the principles understanding, they asked them, what was it that you heard that really helped you? They actually did research to find out. And Jack was talking about this research, and I was kind of nodding off, because in my mind, research is boring, I'm not interested. And then I kind of caught what he was saying. And he said, it turned out the research said that the second most helpful thing for people was when they made the connection between thought and feeling, and they realized that they're living in a thought-created experience. I'm like, what? That's only the second most helpful thing? That's what he said. I went and grabbed him in the break to make sure I'd heard it right. And he's like, yeah. Whereas the more, number one, fundamentally powerful and sustainable change occurred, not when people heard that. That was helpful. But what really helped them in a sustainable way, and this is often people who've been suffering for decades and then became free of that suffering, that was one piece, but it wasn't the only thing. The main thing that they heard was that they weren't broken after all, that they were fundamentally okay. They didn't know that, and somebody reflected that back in a gentle way such that they could hear it, and they got it. And they saw what we call innate health for themselves, perhaps for the first time in their life. That is what brings about deep and sustainable change, according to the research. Now, I was blown away by that. I went up to Jack and said, so why is everybody talking about thought and feeling? He just shrugged in his Jack-like way. He says, I don't know, I guess it's easy to talk about. He's probably right. It probably is. But there was no good reason, you know. That changed the way that I talk about the principles when I'm sharing it in terms of emphasis, in terms of what I emphasize, right? I want to make sure that people don't just hear about the thought-feeling connection. I want to make sure that at some stage on their journey with me, they're going to really get a sense that they're okay on the inside for themselves. And I'm not done with them until they get that. It's like, oh, I'm good to go. I know how it works. It's all thought. No, wait a minute. Come back here. Yeah. So that's good to know, isn't it? That some people can get one facet and it really helps. But there's another facet that maybe will be deeper for them still. And I think that's true for all of us. And which is why I think we're all encouraged, and I would encourage you to stay open to seeing more, and to be, to continue on your learning journey. Because there is always more to see. They're not kidding when they say this, all the teachers. There's more to see, there's more to see. It's actually true. And there's even more to see about the same facet. The one that blew your mind when you first saw it and it got you on board this train. You'll see more about that. Even if you stay in that same lane for some time, that one will start to open up and deepen. And that's cool too. But at some point, it'll take a little detour and you'll catch a glimpse of another piece. So the innate well-being piece is a biggie for me. And particularly, it resonated obviously for me as well because of my background in the healing arts, my interest and passion in holistic healing. And what I started to see was that this understanding, for me, it just makes perfect sense in terms of having what I would call a truly holistic paradigm for health. It makes perfect sense. I had no conflict from the principles understanding with my understanding from homeopathy, for example, which is a form of energy medicine, energy healing. To me, it's completely aligned, that tells me that it's true. In the same way that I know homeopathy is fundamentally true, because it has principles behind it as well. Which is why it never goes away, despite all attempts to get rid of it and suppress it and tell everybody that it's nonsense and it's just placebo. Guess what? It just keeps working, really annoyingly. It keeps working. It's really annoying for the skeptics and the people who don't like it. Why does it keep working? Because it's true. There's a principle behind it that's fundamentally true. So that's another facet. The principle piece is actually a facet. And some people open that door and see something really powerful. I think I was listening to Keith Blevins, and that's the first time I really got that. It was like, oh, I'd never heard anyone talk about that before in that way. The fact that it's a principle points to the notion that there's something that's fundamentally true, and it's true for all people, for all times, under all circumstances, and it's equally true whether you've heard of it or you haven't. Whether anyone's explained it to you or they didn't, whether you understand it consciously or you don't, makes no difference, it's already true. That's powerful. And it brings a consistency to the field, which otherwise wouldn't exist. If someone isn't experiencing the change that we know is possible through this understanding, they just haven't heard it deeply enough yet. Right? It's not the principles are failing in this particular individual case. They can't fail for anyone. Again, that's powerful when you really see that. They can't fail to bring a person back to their well-being and to recognize the truth of who they are. They literally can't fail. It's just a question of being patient enough. If we can be patient enough with ourselves and with the people that we're working with, at some point they're going to see something, they're going to get a glimmer, and then they're on their journey. Yeah? So we don't get to give up on anyone. There's no reason to give up on anyone, because what's true for one is true for everyone. That's the potential of this. And for me as a practitioner, as an educator, and someone who's done a lot of one-to-one work as well, that's so reassuring to know, isn't it? That I don't have to make any kind of judgment call about who might benefit, who might not, who's more worthy of getting the benefits from this understanding. I don't have to make any kind of judgment call of that sort. I don't have to make any predictions either. In fact, it's a good idea if I don't, because I usually get it totally wrong. Often the people that I think, oh yeah, that person's really, they're going to see this in a couple of minutes. It's going to be amazing. A couple of years later, they're still scratching away at it. And their partner who they dragged along and wasn't even interested, off they go. We don't know. But it's true. There's a fundamental truth to it. And I remember Keith saying, once the science understands the principles behind it, he says not only does it bring consistency of results over time, what it also brings is a kind of predictability. Right? You can actually start to almost predict, if and when this happens, this is what the result will be. Then it becomes a true science. And certainly from Keith's perspective, he says that's where we are now, in the field of psychology. But it's not just the field of psychology. I'm not a psychologist, but I can still benefit from Sid Banks's insight, and as we all can. It doesn't seem to care what profession we're in. And that's the other thing about principles. On my website for my training, I call it application agnostic. It's application agnostic. It doesn't care what role we're in, what we think we need help with, or what we think other people are here to benefit from hearing. It doesn't seem to care. It's completely neutral. Isn't that fantastic as well? So that's another facet. And once you get into the well-being piece, what that connects to is the wisdom piece. There's another facet there. And why are they connected? Well, it seems, although I don't think we can make a rule about this, but when we're in, let's say, in alignment with our innate well-being, so we're relatively open and at ease and relaxed, as you all are now, for example, we become more susceptible to hearing the whispers of wisdom from universal mind intelligence. It's coming through all the time. It's an always-on system. It's just that if we're too busy-minded and too distracted, we've got too much else going on, we can't hear it, at least not so well. So it's not that the wisdom suddenly gets switched on, I don't think that's how it works. I think it's more just our listening improves and we become more available to it, to its message. So then we start to see people benefiting from listening into wisdom. And wisdom's such a cool thing. I love this blew me away. When I heard Sid Banks talk about wisdom, his definition of wisdom is universal mind intelligence when it's uncontaminated by personal thinking. Wow. I never heard wisdom described like that. And when you see it like that, therefore, he goes on to say, therefore it's got nothing to do with age or experience. And as soon as you kind of see that, you're like, yeah, that has to be true. That explains why wisdom comes out of the mouths of young children on a regular basis and nonsense comes out of the mouths of adults on a regular basis, right? Nothing to do with age or experience. So the fact that we're all tapped into wisdom, just think of it this way, there's so many aspects to that are helpful. As a parent, Oh, thank God, my kids have got access to wisdom. In fact, they got more access than I have. Well, what am I bothering worrying about them for? Or thinking I need to know what they need when they've got that access, right? I don't need to plan their life out for them. I don't need to have any preconceived ideas as to what they should be doing, what direction they should be going in, or anything. If I can just create a space and an environment as best I can within which they learn to listen and trust their own wisdom, they're good to go. Isn't that cool? That's the best news as a parent for me. You just get to love them and leave them alone. Brilliant. Which has always been my parenting strategy. I haven't seen my kids for years. No, that's not true. The cool thing about wisdom, I was reflecting on wisdom, I thought, to me it's like what you've always known but you never learned it. That's what it feels like to me. When I get a hit of wisdom, it's really strange because it has this peculiar sensation of, I already knew that. Right? It always feels like that. It's deeply familiar, and yet it's fresh at the same time. Isn't that weird? It's something that we already knew, but we never learned it anywhere because it's not coming from our past. It's coming in the moment, and it's individually tailored and crafted for that individual and for what they need in this moment in order to proceed in their life. And the problem with wisdom, if we can call it that, is when you get a hit of it and it redirects your life in a really helpful way, so now you know what to do to, I don't know, solve something that you've been grappling with, lose some weight, quit smoking, I don't know, whatever it is, whatever wisdom helps you to do, what do you do after that? You write a book. And because your friends demand to know, right? What did you do? You look amazing. It's fantastic. You look 10 years younger. You need to write a book about this. So the person says, yeah, what did I do? Let me think now. And of course, they can't remember the bloody insight because that was ages ago. So what they write down in the book is all the things that they've done by listening to their wisdom. And that becomes the bestseller. And then we go buy the book, mugs that we are, thinking it's going to change our life. And we do all the steps which are not coming from our wisdom. And we wonder why it's not working for us. It's a bummer, isn't it? Yeah. But it's very good for the self-help book industry. But that's good to see. It's amazing how quickly people's bookshelves get cleared when they realize this. Some people are nodding here, yeah. If your house is collapsing under the weight of self-help books, like mine used to, this is very good news. Because you realize not only why they didn't really help you in the way that they benefited the author, it's not that they didn't and couldn't, they probably never will. The only way that it could be helpful is if it acts as a catalyst for you to see something for yourself, which is what you need to see, and then you're going to take different steps anyway that will get you to where you need to go. Yeah? So that's the kind of peculiarity of wisdom. It's got a little bear trap in it, which you've got to watch out for. And Sid Banks was very clear on this. He said, you cannot give wisdom away to anybody else. The best that we can do is create a conducive environment within which they get in touch with their own. And we already know what that is. We just help them to relax and be open and to trust what comes to them. Yeah. And I saw, as a health practitioner, I started to see amazing things happen when people just do that. If that's all they did, I say just, that's like, that is the secret sauce. If a person starts listening to their wisdom on a daily basis, or at least a regular basis, their entire life will incrementally change for the better. And that improvement will continue for the rest of their life. Why? Because they're listening more to what's actually true in the moment at each stage of their life, and they're letting things go that no longer serve them, that they no longer need to live by. That's a necessary part of following wisdom, if you haven't noticed. Most of it is just ditching crap that you no longer need. It's like, oh, that diet that I've been on for 25 years that wasn't working, I don't have to do that anymore. I could just do this. And when you just do this, guess what? It feels easy, it feels natural, it doesn't feel like work. Nothing is being forced. Often you don't even notice that you're doing something different to what you were doing before. And yet other people are amazed at what's changing. It's like, what are you doing? I don't know. Just getting on with my life. Forrest Gump, you know. It's wild. It's like you're just walking through life doing your thing without any conscious, I mean, occasionally you might be conscious of it, but mostly we're not. We're just making these little incremental micro adjustments because we've learned to listen in. And if we're not sure, one of the things that I've learned that's been really helpful, people say, how do you know, Ian, if it's wisdom or if it isn't? Do you ever get that question? Yeah, if you're asking that question, it isn't. That's not it. You're in your head. So then, well, what do I do when I'm asking that question? Get out of your head. And then you'll know. I mean, really, it's that simple. Well, what do I do to get out of my head? Whatever you like. I don't know what you should do to get out of your head. I know what I do to get out of my head. Go down Benidorm to the karaoke bar. I mean, salsa, yes. You do what you need to do, right? There's no formula for that, but you know, in the moment. How will you know it's the right thing? Because it feels right. I mean, it's like really simple. It's blindingly obvious. You just do the thing that feels naturally right to you, rather than what you think you should be doing. Yeah, that's the only shift that we need to make, away from what we think we should be doing to what just feels naturally like the right thing to do in a given moment. Another trap there, just another little trap I want to alert you to, is that when we do something like that, based on wisdom, and it works out really well, what's the temptation?
Do it again.
Do it again. That works really well. Next time we're up against something that feels a bit similar, oh, I know what, I remember. Now it's no longer wisdom, right? Now it's from the past. Watch out. That's not wisdom anymore. Even though it worked beautifully, it changed your life. This could literally be a week ago, or even a day ago. It's no longer wisdom. That's a big trap. I've fallen into that one so many times, and I've seen so many people fall into it. It's so tempting to turn wisdom into a formula, which you're going to replicate, right? That's what we do, isn't it? We learn how something works, and then we just replicate it. Now we've got it down. Yeah, good luck with that. Wisdom doesn't play that game. It's in the moment. It's what I call the truth of the moment. First training I did in the principles, that's what came to me. I called it the truth of the moment training. People said, what's it about? I said, I have no idea, but you'll know if you come. How can I know? I'm in this moment, I'm not in that one. Right? People are asking me ahead of time, what's going to happen? Well, I don't know. If I tell you now, that won't be the truth of that moment. To my surprise, 20 odd people signed up. That's nuts, isn't it? Yeah, so I like the wisdom facet. It's one that I'm quite keen on. So we look at the thought feeling, we look at how that connects to innate well-being, what Sydney Banks called innate mental health sometimes. One of the most powerful things that I heard him say in one of his talks, every single human being is sitting in the middle of mental health, they just don't know it. Jeez. And I knew he was speaking the truth. So as a health practitioner up until that point, I'd done what I thought was good work, the best that I knew to do. I'd managed to help a lot of people, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that every single human being was sitting in the middle of mental health. And all that had to happen was that they became aware of that for themselves. And it doesn't matter how long they've been suffering, doesn't matter how many labels they've been given, doesn't matter how many medications they're on, doesn't matter what ramifications are of the suffering that they had. All of that it literally gets erased. The person sees for themselves that they are innately okay. Personally, I think Jack's research was accurate. I think it was right. It is the deepest, most powerful thing that I've seen bring about amazing changes in people's lives who never thought that was possible. And I didn't even, if I'm honest, I didn't even think it was possible for them either. And yet, we both get proved wrong in a beautiful way. I know with Amy's amazing book and work and workshops, there's a whole facet that has opened up thanks to people like Amy and one of the people the two trainers that I learned with, Mark Howard and Kathy Casey. Mark worked a lot with addictions, recovery. Kathy worked a lot in the prison system, criminal justice. And what that speaks to, what that alerted me to, is that there's a whole facet of this work which is about, let's call it behavioural change. You know, how we can actually fundamentally change from some long-term, seemingly chronic, intractable habit of doing things over and over and over a certain way and not being able to do anything different. And then by a simple shift in consciousness, moving to a new place of awareness where doing that no longer makes sense, so we just stop. And we do something else instead, which is much healthier. It's like, whoa! That is such a unbelievably massive shift for the whole field of prevention, recovery, everything that goes with it, addictions treatment. There's so many kind of strands that goes off into helping people in the criminal justice system. What's the biggest problem in criminal justice? Pretty much everybody goes back to prison after they come out. Yeah, I don't know what the percentages are. Jackie probably knows.
I'm sure, I can't remember.
I think it's above 80%, from what I've read. Certainly in the UK. It's like a revolving door, you know. Come out, do the same thing, get back in. Why? Same consciousness. Yeah, and we know that from our own experience. We do the same thing over and over, we get the same result. And if we can't see that it's been created internally in that way, we tend to blame the person or the situation or whatever. We go somewhere else, find a nice shiny new person or a new shiny situation, thinking that solved the problem, only to discover that we end up feeling exactly the same way in this new situation as we felt in the last one. Who's done that? That's all of us. Yes. The ones who didn't raise a hand, you got that to look forward to. Or you're lying. By the way, I took a lie detector once. A lie detector test. No, I didn't. There's another facet which I just want to touch on. And for me, this is where all the others are leading. We're all leading in a certain direction. Have you noticed that once you get on this principles train, you're kind of all heading in the same direction? Do you feel that? I feel that. Each in our own sweet way, of course, and we're all getting interested in different aspects at different times, but there is a kind of directionality to it. I call it the one-way street, basically. Once you're in this track, you ain't going back, right? It's not actually available to go back. You can't. One of the things I got interested in is what are the, I was talking to Joe about this the other day, what are the symptoms that are observable when people start getting healthier through shifts in understanding? He told me I had to write that book. Thank you, Joe. I'll do it. He called it like a DSM manual for health, right? I thought that's a good way of thinking about it. Because I started to track it over time. When you start to see that there are recognizable, and this is the Keith Blevins predictability part, you can actually predict the gains which incrementally will start to accrue over time as we get mentally healthier. Isn't that wonderful? And we can be confident in those predictions. They will gradually start to emerge over time. One of the first ones that, just to give you an example, one of the first ones that people typically notice is, I still get completely lost in my thinking and I go batshit crazy, but I recover quicker. That's cool, isn't it? We notice something in us wakes up when we lose it much quicker than it used to. What used to be a 3-day bad mood or whatever it was we used to get stuck in. 24 hours now, I'm already out of it. 2 hours. That's amazing. That's huge. You know, that's huge. Think how much time you've just reclaimed. It's incredible. And it's so easy to get used to that new level of well-being so quickly that we forget how much time we were wasting and squandering before, being miserable and blaming the outside world for how we were feeling. So that's a really cool thing to have eyes for. So I sort of try and develop eyes for the things that are invisible to the people that I'm working with, so I can reflect it back for them. Because it's a helpful thing. It's a helpful thing to acknowledge and to be grateful for the gains, even if it feels like small gains. Usually we're just on to the next thing that we haven't gained yet, you know? Yeah, but this hasn't changed. Well, yeah, but everything else in your life has. It's so funny, it's so cute how the mind gets fixated on the one thing, right? It's like, what are you talking about? Look at this. Yeah, but that's all of us. So there's the whole mental health facet, which is also very interesting, which Sid Banks saw right from the early days of his initial waking up experience. Turns to his wife and mother-in-law, I think it was. One day this understanding, what I've just realized, will transform the fields of psychology and psychiatry. Can you imagine how that went down? Sid, shut up. What are you talking about? And he wasn't boasting, he wasn't bragging, he wasn't making some fantastical claim. That was obvious to him. It was obvious to him that, to quote our friend Judith Sedgman and Christine Heath's podcast, psychology has it backwards. Right? They have it backwards. Just as we all have it backwards if we haven't learned this understanding. We think that we are the way we are because of what's happened and is happening on the outside. Right? We all think that until we get introduced to this. And it turns that around for us and we start to see really what's truly going on, the true situation. So that's a whole facet which, yeah, I think I'm very excited just to see how that plays out in the mental health field. I hope I get to see some of that in my lifetime, because we're barely getting started. And then similarly with the physical health facet, that's something that interests me a lot as well. I know from some of the stories that I've heard, people were having spontaneous healing, spontaneous remissions when they were just listening to Sid Banks. That happened not just once, but numerous times. I don't think Sid was keen to emphasize it because he didn't want queues of sick people coming to his house, probably. Smart guy. And so people asked him, Sid, I've got this health problem, what should I do? He said, go see a doctor. He didn't really get involved in it directly. And I think that's led to a kind of tendency within the Three Principles world to think that this doesn't apply on the physical health level. I know some practitioners have developed that idea. I don't think that at all. For me, it applies absolutely, because to me, it's one system. It's not mind and body, it's mind-body. Yeah, it should be one word, really. It's one system. And that, just as Sid was pointing out on that video clip, the formless and the form are one. It's just manifesting in a different way, but it's absolutely one and the same. So that intelligence that we talk about, which was wisdom, that internal guidance system that we can live by, guess what? It's the same intelligence that's infusing all of the cells of our body every minute of our lives. It's exactly the same, and it has exactly the same wisdom in it and the same healing potential within it. We barely got started with exploring that from a principles perspective. So that's very exciting to me. And if any of you are interested in that, because that's your background or your passion, I encourage you to bring your understanding to, shine the light of your understanding in that area, and it'll start to open up. There's a lot that we haven't seen there yet. Isn't that cool? I find that exciting, personally. Maybe it's because it's my thing. It might not be your thing. It doesn't matter. Other people are looking at what can it do in sports psychology and coaching, and this is wonderful that people say to me, Ian, it sounds good, but would it help these people over here? And I go, are there human beings involved? If so, the answer is yes. And that's the universality. That's the principle part again. Again, we can be really confident about that. We can go into a situation where we don't know anything about the thing that the people are doing, like the type of work they're doing or the type of suffering that they're up against. It doesn't matter. We don't need to have gone through that. We're bringing something that's universal. And again, I didn't quite fully believe that when I first heard that. I heard that from Kathy Casey. She was like, yeah, she said, you should have seen it. Like she was telling us when she worked for George Pransky, he kept sending her out to all these random places. She's like, George, I don't know anything about that. He's like, don't worry, they know everything about that. You'll be fine. You know what you know. Yeah? Stay in your lane. You know what you know. And you're bringing something that every single human being has access to within themselves. How do we access it? It's through a kind of resonance, isn't it? And this is the last facet I want to talk about. It's a kind of resonance. Jack talks about the listening a lot, the deep listening. Listening beyond the words. Not just what are we listening to, and what are we listening for, but also where are we listening from? So we can take listening deeper and deeper. You start to get a sense of, oh, where am I actually listening from? So you're moving away from the content, the form. You're kind of going further back upstream to that place of listening within yourself. What are we getting in touch with? We're getting in touch with that formless spiritual dimension of who we are. And this to me is the golden diamond facet that's kind of hiding in the middle of all the others. It's a spiritual understanding. I remember Mark Howard sharing a story where he was about to go give a talk to a bunch of psychologists and he's a bit nervous. He wasn't feeling too confident about what he's going to talk about. And Sid rings him up, which he was prone to do just at the opportune moment. Sid rings him up and says, Mark, have you done that talk yet? No, it's tomorrow, Sid. Okay, tell them it's spiritual. He's like, what? Sorry? Tell them it's spiritual. He says he said it to him about 6 times or something. He's like, okay, Sid, I got it. And then he's completely baffled. It's like, how am I going to go in there? And this is a psychologist. This is not going to go down well. So he just had to get quiet and connect to his own wisdom. And what he realized was that he needed to find a way to communicate in such a way that they went out of everything that they knew as psychologists and got in touch with something that was beyond all of that, which is within all of us, whether we're psychologists or not. So Mark found a way to do that. How do we do that? We get in touch with it within ourselves. It's really very, very simple. And that, to me, that's the gem, if you like, in the middle of all this. It's not just an understanding that helps us to see and appreciate how our experience is being created. It is that, and that is wonderful and amazing and empowering. But that's the springboard to a deeper realization of who we are on the inside, and the fact that we truly are all of the same essence. I get a sense that you might have touched that here in the last few days. I certainly have. And when we do touch that within ourselves, it doesn't matter who we're with, whatever we thought about them, whatever they thought about us, whatever we even thought about ourselves, just becomes momentarily irrelevant. It's the same speaking to the same, and you feel it, and it's beautiful, and its nature is love. And what I love is that you two create a space here where we get to do that together in a group like this. It's a very, very beautiful thing that you're doing. It's very beautiful. And I deeply appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.